Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 11.5 tier list for AD carries. As always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. Starts around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every night. Usually goes till about 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. Then we do fresh tier lists and patch notes for each patch, as well as constantly adding in more champion guides, topical guides like best one trick, how to macro better, how to micro better, catalog of coaching sessions with over 250 entries in it, and just tons and tons of other stuff. So be sure to check all that out on the channel. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So the Mark Yetter tweet about what's coming up on this patch doesn't really affect AD carry too much, I don't believe. Muramana, the damage on attacks is going down from 2.5% down to 1.5%, and abilities are going up a little bit to 2.7% for ranged, plus 6% of your total attack damage. So if you have 200, you'd get an extra 12 on hit damage. So I think this is a slight buff for champions that use abilities to attack a lot with this. So Senna, it might be a little bit better. With her Q, Ezreal might be a little bit better. But other champions that are just straight up auto attacking with this, it's probably not going to be as strong. So maybe Sivir. Melee champions that use this, it's actually a pretty big buff. So it's 3.5% for melee. So I'm not exactly sure. I know there were Kayn was trying this out, and Fiora at one point was trying this out top lane, and then they weren't anymore. So we'll see, but I don't think it's going to shake up the meta too much. Ezreal is not really building this anymore in most builds, and Senna, I believe, has also moved away from that. Okay, ADC Seraphine is getting nerfed, though. I didn't even include her on the list here. You could still play her and probably be alright, but it's a lot less damage on her notes. Shaco Support's going to be out, so I don't think that'll affect the overall meta too much. Rel is going to be a little bit weaker, so 2 seconds less on that. So champions like Leona will probably step up and be a bit stronger. Rakan, stuff that Rel was pretty good against. But I think there will be other good engage options that'll still be in the meta. Senna herself, she can no longer get over 100% crit that gets converted over to the on-hit damage from Gensu's, so that might hurt the Gensu conversion rate a little bit, because remember, the main reason that people get Gensu's on her is not for the attack speed, it's because it converts your critical strike over to on-hit damage, which has a couple of benefits. Number one, it gets around the penalty with Senna's passive, where her crits only hit for 150% instead of 175%, so it bypasses that. And then apparently number two, with this, you could have over 100% crit, and that would still convert over to on-hit damage, which I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently it was. And then number three, that allows extra damage on your abilities, most notably your Q, which does trigger with on-hit abilities, right? It does not crit, but it can trigger with on-hit. So it made your Q stronger, it allowed you to scale better past 100% for the super late game, and it allowed you to bypass the penalty in the passive. So that's why it has become kind of the dominant build. But anyway, so that's no longer going to be a thing. I think people will still get this, because this is only going to pertain to, like, if you have 5 or 6 items or something, and you could easily go off of crit and get something else instead later on in your build. Like, you don't have to get all crit items. So I think that there'll still be plenty of room for that build. And then Karma and Pyke, I don't think are going to shake up the meta too much bot lane. Kog'Maw is getting an extra 1% per attack, or at least in later levels, he's getting 1%. So when you max your W, which you max first, I still think he's going to be on the weak side. I think if you just want a stand and fire, like hyper-scaling champion, probably just Jinx and Twitch will be your better bets. But maybe with Lulu, if you want a mixed damage champion bottom, Twitch can do mixed damage now. So we'll see. But overall, I don't think that's going to matter. They're buffing up Samira a little bit, but they are not undoing nearly the mountain of buff or nerfs that she got last patch, so I still think she'll be in a bad place. And then Twitch overall, they are lowering his AP ratio on his passive. I assume that's the max stacked AP ratio. I still think it'll be pretty good early on if you rush the Nashers, although after that, people might change it up a little bit and do something else rather than Death Cap. And then the R, you're getting an extra 5 AD at all ratio, or at all ranks, and then it's lasting 1 extra second. So that's actually really nice. The R for all forms of Twitch, but the AD, obviously, for AD Twitch. So I still think he's going to be pretty strong right now if you have him with the right composition, if you can protect him in solo queue. I think it'll be pretty good. Okay, so let's get into the tier list here. Kaisa, I still think is going to be number 1 overall. Her win rate did drop a little bit when they nerfed her, but you gotta keep in mind there's still a ton of people playing her that are auto-filled or that just don't really know how to play her that well, and she is kind of high skill cap to play her at an optimal level, right? So like knowing when to dash, to dodge things, like positioning to really get the most out of your Qs and things like that. So I think that she's still going to be really strong. So they nerfed her missiles. I don't remember if they nerfed anything else, but it did lower the win rate. But her overall power, especially her ceiling, if she's played correctly, is just so high. So she does have some wave clear in the laning phase with the Q. So it's not great, but it is better than some of the other hyper-scaling contemporaries like Vayne. She does clear better early. She does have some isolation damage. So she can actually put up a decent amount of damage in the early game against those isolated targets. So probably more than Vayne, although Vayne does take press the attack. We'll talk about her in a second. But I'm comparing them because I think they're both like extremely dangerous right now, and they're both kind of good in similar ways, although they start to diverge a little bit as the game unfolds and they get different items. But overall, I think that she's still going to be solid. Now, there's a couple of things that have really made her... She was good pretty much all of last season, too, from what I remember. At least a lot of it. She was certainly viable. But there's been a couple of like innovations over the last few months, if you haven't played or you haven't really kept up with ADC, that have made her a lot stronger. So the big one is that people have sort of shifted away from Kraken and they've moved towards Gale Force. And that's a theme that you'll see a lot on many of these champions that I show you, is that Gale Force is still the item. It's still the go-to item. It has fantastic stats, and it basically has a free flash on it that has like a high burst damage as well. So it's just too powerful. They did nerf it back up to 90 seconds when they had taken it down to 60 seconds, but that's just so paramount right now in this meta. I've got the cat on me if you're wondering like what that weird tail is there. The cat just jumped up and wanted to hang out, right, Sadie? But you gotta have that, right? Like to dodge from like Bard ults, Leona ults, to dodge Thresh hooks, Blitz hooks. You know, Flash is good. It's a powerful spell to chase people down and kill them. Now, especially for Kaisa, though, she synergizes so well with that because a lot of times she's going to take Executioner second, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But it allows her to dash forward and get that isolation execute a lot of times, right? So that just gives her the ability to like dive towers really well, and then sometimes like jump back out with her ult or jump back out with Gale Force. Just really doubles down on a lot of her mobility and burst damage. So it's particularly good on her because she already has lots of tools to help burst people out. And then it sets up really well to go with the Collector second, which is another thing you're going to want on a lot of champions out there, is the Collector. This item's just really overpowered. You end up, if you get like 4 kills in a game, it ends up only costing you like 100 gold to get that passive, and that execute is huge. It doesn't sound like it's a big deal. Oh, it's just 5% of their health, but it comes up all the time. Or that thing will just blast people at the end of the game. And it's not only that, it's the components are so strong because it builds out of a serrated dirk, which is like the most overpowered AD item in the game because lethality is only valued at 5 gold each for some reason on serrated dirk. If you go look at the price action on that item, it's only valued at 5 gold each, and it usually removes a lot of armor. It doesn't exactly remove like that amount of armor, but it's basically like you're paying something like, I don't know, 8 to 10 gold to remove 20 gold worth of stats from somebody from the armor, because it doesn't immediately remove it at a 1-to-1 ratio. It has a certain percentage based on your levels. But anyways, super efficient item, and just the build path itself. Once you get Gale Force, you can get that serrated dirk, and then that allows you to evolve your Q really fast ahead of schedule. And that's why people did do the old school Mirror Mana build last season, was because it was only 2,400 gold to get the Mana Immune, and that allowed you to evolve 800 gold faster than completing your second item. So that was an innovation that people went to, and now that people went away from Mirror Mana and they've gone towards the Collector, then she's even better in the early game because Mana Immune is trash in the early game. I've always said that. It's always been the case. It did scale really well later into the game, and it did allow you to evolve to get away with you know, some weakness from your item because you'd evolve your Q and that would help you out. But now you can have your cake and eat it too. You can evolve early with the Q, and you get a super powerful early game item that builds out of the most OP AD item and is a really strong completed item that only costs 3,000 gold. Then it just works really well with the Gale Force because once they're low, once they're below, like I think it's 50% health here, then you can see it does extra damage. So you've got to execute on that. You've got to execute basically on the Collector. You have your passive does a percentage of max health, and Halo Blades allows you to trigger that faster. Then you've got the isolation on your Q for the extra damage. So she just does a lot of burst damage early on in the game for an AD carry. So super strong. And this is also a little bit different. After the Hurricane nerf a couple of patches ago, sometimes people would go Hurricane second as well, just to get the evolved Q. But that just really wasn't as strong. Like, this is good for wave clear, and this is like pretty good for team fighting. But it's really the Collector innovation that has made her strong over the last little bit. Now, second item, you can still go Hurricane, and that's good for wave clear. That's good for team fights. But a lot of people are digging this Phantom Dancer as well, which gives you that extra movement speed to kite people and run people down. So if you're going to be running away from like Skarners, Udyrs, that kind of stuff all game, then Phantom Dancer might be even better, because then you've got the movement speed off of this, you have the dash off of your ult, you have the other dash off of your Gale Force, you have the invisibility off of your E, so you have all sorts of tools just to kite people and just dance around in the fight and make it very difficult for these bruisers to get on you. So you have the burst to assassinate people. If you land a far away W or you follow up on a piece of CC or whatever, you have the burst to kill people, but you're also one of the most mobile AD carries that can just position around a lot of divers. So she's just pretty much ready for any situation. And like a front to back clean 5v5 team fight where you can't dive very easily, where they have like a really big front line. Yes, this build you might be able to get outscaled by something like a Twitch or a Jinx in a team fight. If you have Hurricane, you can still put up pretty good team fight numbers because your Hurricane bolts are going to apply your passive, and she's still like not bad at that. It's just your closer range, and it's not as much damage as like Jinx just raining rockets on you or Twitch with his ult. So there are some scenarios where you can get a hold of her, but there's far fewer weaknesses with her than other champs. I think they'll probably nerf her again in 11.6 or 11.7 would be my guess, and I would nerf her range. Just give her the Lucian treatment. If you're going to have that much mobility, I think she should be 500 range, just like Lucian or just like Sivir. But we'll see what they do with her. But for now, I think she's going to be number one, even though her win rate's not the highest. Keep in mind, again, that you have a bunch of people that are auto-filled that are going to be playing her that don't know what they're doing. And she does have a decently high skill cap because you have so many different tools and so many different build options. So there will still be people building tier on her. There will still be people building like Nashor's Tooth and some of these older builds. So that'll drop the overall win percentage down. But if you know what you're doing, if you build her correctly and you have a decent amount of practice on her, I still think she's going to be top of the line. Okay, and then the next one that I want to mention is Vayne. And I just had to throw in the towel on this. Like, I don't necessarily know that I fully understand it. But she's really good in season 11. So I've kind of been a little off on this for maybe a few patches. I just didn't want it to be true, but statistically it just is. And after playing against her a lot, and especially after some nerfs to her competition, most notably Jhin, and then also Kaisa did get a nerf. It did bring her down from 53 to 52. So that statistically that did happen, even though Kaisa is still really good. All of that has helped Vayne out. And I think that the change to Phantom Dancer, I really underestimated just how useful that would be for her. So I thought that she would really want the attack speed more, but it turns out that the AD is actually something that was a little bit more useful on her. But Vayne, so she has kind of a hard time early, but there aren't that many hard harassed champions that you can't heal through in the laning phase. And some of the enchanters are becoming a bit more powerful, especially with Rel getting nerfed on this patch a little bit. You can expect to see maybe some more enchanters, although enchanters were pretty good in a Rel to begin with. Seraphine is getting nerfed as well, so that does open up a space for stuff like Lulu, like Janna to be a little bit stronger here, because they're not competing with Seraphine as much. You'll still see Seraphine, she'll be okay. It just makes Lulu and stuff like that a bit stronger by comparison. And those champions work so well with both Kaisa and Vayne because they do so much high sustained damage. They scale so well with attack speed. Sadie, They scale so well with attack speed that it can be difficult to deal with that. Hold on a second. Run her out. She's trying to rummage through the trash. I just shake a bag at her. But anyway, so she is weaker in the laning phase than Kaisa is. She doesn't have the isolation damage, but she does have the condemn, which is really nice. So she can kind of peel some of those engaged champs a little bit better. And your Q is on a much lower cooldown, so she is more mobile. So she can dodge stuff like Leona, Blitzcrank, Thresh. She does operate more defensively than I think Kaisa does in the early game, although she doesn't have as many kill opportunities. But if you can just survive that laning phase, right? If they're just chilling and they're just going to let you get your couple items, she just really goes off to the races off of just 1 or 2 items. And part of this, she can still trade kind of well with press the attack early. If you get 3 silver bolts and a press the attack proc on somebody, it's probably going to be 50% of their health. So that is very strong. You know, Hail of Blades used to be something that was pretty good on her as well. But I think people really just like the press the attack just so you have some extra burst. Now keep in mind that 8 to 12% from all sources, I'm like 99% sure that does not include true damage, so that does not include your silver bolts. But it does include your Q damage and just normal, you know, auto attacks. So it's still pretty good. And this does give you a bit more utility in team fights if you can get that press the attack trigger. Remember, it's all sources, not just you. So that can help your whole team take down some of those pesky tanks like the Udyr, like the Skarner, like the Rammus. Because not only do you have the true damage to help take them down, but you're giving your whole team that extra 12% damage to help take them down a little bit more. So good defensive choice early, although you are probably going to fall down in CS. You are probably going to get bullied a little bit. There are some builds you can get to kind of work around that. So you can take Ravenous Hunter, which the fact that this is Omnivamp helps out a ton too, because you don't have a lot of spell damage early, but the fact that this does trigger whenever you auto attack waves is nice. And then you can also take Taste of Blood secondary as well if you just want a little bit more healing. And not a lot of people do this anymore, I guess, but back in the day you could take even something like Legend Bloodline if you were having a bit of a hard time with some harassment champs in lane. So there are some things you can do about it. The change to Doran's Blade to give it a bit more sustain also helps her out early on in the lane. But as you can see with this chart, she just goes off to the races. Kaisa actually falls off with the Gale Force later on. She is like really good later on in the game, but she's kind of at her peak kind of in that early mid game with that build. Whereas Vayne, you know, once she completes her second item, is really off to the races. And she's so slippery. It's all about those cooldowns with Vayne. She can constantly tumble, go invisible, make it very difficult to target her, use her E to knock back some of these bruisers. I mean, she was just built for mobility, built for dealing with these meatball champs just trying to run at her. She's so good at dealing with that compared to other AD carries, especially if you take the Gale Force, which a lot of people are not doing that. But look at this win rate here. Now, yes, it's not the highest sample size in the world, but a 58% win rate if you take Gale Force on Vayne. Right, versus 54 with Kraken and 53 with the Mortal Shield Bow. Now, again, that's only a 4,000 sample size, but that's still 4,000 games versus, you know, Kraken's like 230,000 sample size. But I think people really underestimate this because, again, it just gives you one more tool to dodge stuff. You're just so slippery, they can't get a hold of you, and this allows you to reposition sometimes. This allows you to reposition to like pin people into walls and things like that too, which is really nice if you're looking for that condemn with your E. You used to have to like flash E, you know, to be able to get those pins into the walls. Now you can Gale Force E to pin people into walls or towers or just whatever kind of terrain is out there. So that really does add an extra little bit for people that are really paying attention to it. And it just gives you that extra bit of burst damage just to kind of take people down. Now, yes, Kraken is going to crank out more sustained damage over time, but you already have really good sustained damage with your Silver Bolts. So I think that this is just really good if you can go for Gale Force. It just adds that extra dimension to you, extra bit of slippery, extra opportunities with the E, and you're already going to have so much damage. And after that, as I said before, I think that this Phantom Dancer, and once again, I really underestimated this thing, but the fact that you can still get 55 attack speed and it gives you the 20 attack damage, that attack damage does scale really well with crit, but it's really that 14% movement speed as well. This adds to your slipperiness. Now, some people, you know, had been going for Gensus, and this is like decent sustained damage if you get a lot of auto attacks. Obviously, you would only want to take this with Kraken. You wouldn't want to do this with Gale Force, but it just feels like it's just a little bit slower. It just doesn't hit quite as hard. It doesn't have any attack damage on it. I mean, the critical strike is nice. Phantom Dancer is also cheaper. It's 200 gold cheaper, which is definitely significant. And it doesn't give you that movement speed or that slipperiness. So a lot of people have moved away from that. I do see Blade of the Ruined King sometimes as well. This can be pretty nice for sustained damage. And it does give you that extra little bit of kiting as well, the 25% for 2 seconds. So not as much kiting as Phantom Dancer. It's also way more expensive. So that's, you know, a lot of it just comes down to cost, and that's why a lot of people are going for Phantom Dancer second. And then third item, if you want the Infinity Edge, is going to give you a little bit more of that burst. Sometimes you might need to complete a Mortal Reminder. Although most people just sit on Executioners until a fourth item if you need that kind of thing. But anyways, really strong, very mobile, great at dealing with Udyr, Skarner, all that nonsense running at you. And I think that's going to continue to be the case. Now, you can get, you know, just completely blown up by something like a Jhin. If he's really fed, he just, you know, like shoots you in the face, or like an assassin might be able to blow you up. But I think more times than not, if you can just survive the laning phase and just get to 2 items, then it's going to be off to the races and very, very difficult to deal with you. All right, next up on my list, Jhin. Not a huge surprise here, and I do want to try to keep this video. I know it's always a meme, but I do want to try to keep it under 30 minutes. So we'll go through these kind of the familiar faces a bit faster. Not much has changed about Jhin. I mean, it's the same drill. He just has really good wave clear early on with his grenades, and really good follow-up CC with his W. Like, being able to W, to chain CC with a Leona, with a Nautilus, with a Rakan. I mean, just anything that does CC, he just follows it up so well. With the W, with the burst damage. And then he has a lot of movement speed too. So he's actually deceptively kind of slippery, especially as you get more crit in your build, because he can go Boost of Swiftness. And then as he keeps landing those crits, then he's going to get all this extra movement speed just to, you know, run around the fight at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And he can sort of self-peel with his W, with his traps. So he's pretty difficult to get away or to run away from as well. Now, he is historically not as great against tanks, just because he doesn't have high sustain damage. He has high burst damage, so if they have enough AD, they might be able to live through that. But people are not getting, they don't have access to the old school Randuins, which really shut down crit builds a lot and was very good against him, so that's helpful. And a lot of people are getting some lighter armor items now than they had in the past on some of these bigger tanks. So they've taken a lot of armor away from, like, Deadman's, for example, only has 40 armor now instead of 80 that it used to have. People are going Kim Tank, which only has 20, I think 20 on it. So he is going to be a little bit squishier with many of these builds because people are not getting the big ticket armor items like Frozen Heart and stuff like that. But anyways, I think that he's still going to be really good. Has a lot of utility, still a very good build path. See what people are doing here. So he's just another abuser of the Gale Force Collector, you know, kind of thing. And Collector works super well with Dark Harvest because that's going to trigger and get him just a little bit lower, and your ultimate, the 4th shot, does extra damage if someone is, you know, I think it does a certain percentage of their missing health extra damage too. So you have Dark Harvest plus the 4th shot on the ultimate plus the Collector is a really good combination for executing people and doing that extra damage. In addition to Gale Force, you know, having that execute kind of damage as well. But yeah, just super strong champ, really strong off of 1 and 2 items, can bully out Kaisa and Vayne in the early game to suppress him a little bit. Gonna have less sustained damage in team fights, gonna still have a harder time breaking through tanks than either one of them, but it has all lined up very well for him. I don't know how well he's done in Pro recently. I don't think a lot of people play him in Pro, just because in Pro they can exploit the fact that he has to reload. He's doing all right. He has 58% in Pro, although not picked a lot. But anyway, still pretty strong. Okay, then Ezreal I actually have up here in S tier. I think I had him in A tier last time, but this champion is just so good right now. If anyone, like, I know his win rate is not stellar. It's one of the lowest on the chart. But if you know how to play him at all, he's just such a menace right now. If you can just land those Qs with this new build, right? With the non-tier build, He just does super well. It completely changes his power spike around because now he's so strong off of one item. Like his first back, he gets Sheen and he starts popping. Like if you hit those Qs with that Sheen on your first back, it just does so much damage. It's going to chunk somebody for like 20% of their health, maybe 25% of their health. They don't have a lot of armor. And just chucking those Qs over and over again can just wear people out in fights. It makes it difficult for them to engage because they're already going to be at low health. Gives you some pretty strong execute power, right? If you E forward, auto attack, you know, Q, auto attack, Q, like you can burst people out really quickly now with this Ezreal build. And then once you complete the Essence Reaver itself, you still get that upgraded Sheen proc there, which scales with your bonus attack damage now. So it's not just Sheen, it's like Super Sheen. And it restores 40% of the damage that you do as mana. So it pretty much gives you infinite mana as long as you land your Qs. And the power curve on it is just so much faster than Mirror Mana because it doesn't take 15 minutes to charge up anymore. And then you combine that with Duskblade, which has become kind of the go-to second item. And this is going to give you an extra 20% ability haste. So you get Essence Reaver plus this, plus like Ionian Boots. Then that's going to give you somewhere in the neighborhood of like 35 to 40% CDR just off of 2 items now. And you get the lethality, which is good not only for just your Q damage, but also for your Sheen proc damage. You get the attack damage, which again scales with the Sheen proc now. And you get that little bit of bonus damage off of the Night Stalker, which can give you resets and gives you some invisibility, which is going to make you more difficult to target in team fights. So once he gets those 2 items, man, he just really starts cracking people. Like, it just does so much damage. And then after that, you have a couple of choices. You can either go for Ravenous Hydra, which has become the go-to over Blade of the Ruined King as your next on-hit damage. The big thing about this is it gives you really nice wave clear. With your Q, it gives you the Omni Vamp, gives you a lot of AD. Remember, Blade of the Ruined King doesn't have that much AD on it. I think it's only got 40, so this has 65 on it, which is good. Has even more ability haste on it, so then that's going to put you over 40% CDR if you get that. It's got the Omni Vamp on it. It's got the Cleave, so if people are grouped up in team fights, does a lot of extra damage. So it's just really strong. Or you can go for Serelda's Grudge, which has the armor pin, the ability haste, the attack damage on it, but now it also slows them for 1 second for 30 seconds. So now you have that utility on it where it just makes it easier to kite out the Udyrs, the Skarners, all that stuff running at you a little bit better. And makes it easier for you and your allies to hit skill shots as well. So you hit that first Q, there's a decent chance you're going to be hitting more Qs because they're going to be slowed. So really good, smooth build path, allows him to start spiking early and take over the game. So it's just kind of flipped the script on what Ezreal used to be, which is, you know, worthless for the first 15 to 20 minutes while you charge up your mirror mana, and then situationally good if you can hit your Qs like a god later on in the game. Now he's super strong in the early game once you get that Sheen proc going, and then from there on out, you're just going to really start hitting like a truck. So they almost nerfed Essence Reaver on this patch. They were previewing it on Surrender at 20, primarily because of Ezreal. There are other champs that abuse it as well, but it was mostly targeted towards Ezreal. But they did remove that. And I will say as well, they also removed the extra range on the trinkets, which people ask me about daily because other content creators made videos about it, even though it wasn't confirmed. But anyway, so super strong, even though I have not historically been a fan of that champion. I think that he is really, really good right now. I like to play him. I always preface that. He's fun, he's interesting, he's unique. I think he's a good design choice. Just a lot of people just can't play him very well. All right, I guess we're going for 40 minutes instead of 30. But anyway, so I think that he is good enough to deserve that S spot right now. And he's obviously tearing it up in Pro. He's 67%, even though he's not picked nearly as much as Kaisa. I think a lot of people are still sleeping on this champ, even though he has a good win rate. That build is just absolutely nasty. Okay, and then Jinx, I've got down in tier 2 here. Some people might have her all the way up in S tier. In my mind, she still is going to be immobile and kind of difficult to pilot right now, but people have been trying her out in Pro. Not to much success. She's got 31% in Pro right now. But I think she's going to be one of the better, like, stand and fire, long range, team fight, just hard scaling champs. So you really want some peel with her. You want like a Janna or a Lulu or just something that can help keep stuff off of you. And ideally something that can get either Ardent Censer or Staff of Flowing Water to help buff you up a little bit more. But she still has mobility problems, and I know people love to go Kraken on her. I'd be curious to see the Gale Force win rate. It's about the same as Kraken. I would personally just go Gale Force. I mean, I'd go Gale Force on almost everybody. It's just 90 seconds for an extra flash. From the support perspective, you know, it makes it so much harder if you're playing Leona or any sort of engaged champion. Like, it's just night and day if someone has Gale Force or not. And if you go Jinx without Gale Force, you're just asking for it. With Leona or Bard or, you know, hooks are going to be much more likely to hit you. It's just really, really difficult. So it's the same thing I was saying earlier with some of the other Gale Force champions. Like, you're going to, or some of the other, Gale Force champions, like, you're already going to do a lot of sustained damage. Like, that's not a problem. And remember that Kraken does not apply on your rocket splashes on extra people, right? Like, you can't trigger this on more than one person at a time. It doesn't work with Hurricane. It doesn't work with your rockets. So it's still just a little bit extra single target. But the big part about her damage is that AoE damage that you do in team fights with those rockets. So yeah, I mean, you don't have like a super amazing combo with Gale Force. You might be able to do something fancy like buffer your zap. I think zap is your W. So like buffer your W and then Gale Force to reposition to hit them with it. I'm not sure if that works out, or if you can Gale Force and then mid Gale Force start the animation for zap. There's probably something like that you can do. So you can zap, you can reposition and throw your rockets or something. Like, there's some cute stuff you can do. But yeah, there's not like, you know, like Vayne can reposition and pin people into walls, you know, that type of stuff. But it's still going to save you. It's still going to allow you to kite better. It still has really good stats on it. You're just giving up a little bit more sustained damage versus tanks. But once again, I think that's okay. So the win rates are about even. It's your choice, but I would err on the side of mobility. And then you pretty much always want Ruin's Hurricane second. There are some people, you know, who really like to get Rapid Fire Cannon, or maybe, I mean, I guess I could maybe see Phantom Dancer if you are really wanting to index heavily towards that kiting, which I could totally understand that versus Udyr or like some of these other champs. Maybe that's a good choice. It does have a higher win rate. But the reason that you want Hurricane is each one of your Hurricane bolts turns into a rocket when you're in rocket form. And so it splashes on everybody. So in other words, if they're all clumped up, you can get 9 hits from one auto attack. So you auto attack, and they're grouped up in a team fight. It's going to throw 3 rockets. Those 3 rockets can hit all 3 of those people if they're clumped. So that's 9 hits, 3 per rocket. So each auto attack is, it's not exactly 9 auto attacks because the rockets aren't like full value, but it's a lot of damage. It's probably the equivalent of at least like 5 auto attacks, and each one of those can crit also. So it is a lot of team fight damage. She's one of the queens of team fight. If you have a front to back, you can go in there, engage, and hold them still, and someone's going to secure the flanks so you don't get flanked by the Gnar or the Zed or whatever. She's going to be one of the best front to back team fight ADCs out there. And then, so you have that, and then you have Infinity Edge. And they did buff her last patch to where her rockets, you just basically fire way, way faster because you don't have the penalty anymore on the rockets. So she has very good sustained damage dealer. She does have really nice wave clear early on with the rockets. If you are not really being threatened in lane, you can poke people with your missiles because they have such long range now. So you got the extra range on the rockets and the extra attack speed on the rockets. And they have made some changes to the itemization, like Hurricanes is much cheaper now and is a much better buy on her. So I think that she is good if she does have the right kind of protection. I think a lot of people still don't position well on her. You're probably going to have to take Cleanse, and you're probably, I would say, probably going to want to take Gale Force to go with that. But if you can position her correctly, if you have the right kind of support, then I think that she can be super good. Now, Aphelios is another one, and I was tempted to put Aphelios a little bit above Jinx. I still kind of am. It just depends on how good you are, but Aphelios is much harder to play. I think it's a similar thing to Jinx, where he's going to be one of the best teamfight champions out there, and that's what most people prefer in Pro to Jinx, as sort of being the de facto, you know, 5-man teamfight ADC of choice. Because he just has so much utility, right? You can blow people up in team fights with, you know, your flamethrower ult and just delete everybody. But you can also serve as like a semi-engage with your ultimate with the Gravitum, the purple gun. And you have really good skirmishing as well. You know, if you have your red gun plus your white gun, that's kind of your skirmish kiting gun. And I think whenever you activate your W with the red gun, it just gives you a lot of extra movement speed. So, just really, really good at skirmish, really good at team fighting. He can serve as a semi-engage, scales extremely well over time, and they have nerfed some stuff about him. But I still think that he's going to be just a really, really good champ if you can learn how to manage your guns correctly and if you can get the right kind of peel. Now, I think that he's still going Kraken as well. I think he kind of has to go Kraken just because of how the on-hit works. They did nerf how it works. No, he is actually going Gale Force. Stand corrected. So he... it's about the same between Kraken and Gale Force. But again, kind of like I say with everybody, having a free flash on 90 seconds, even if it didn't do any damage on that active, would probably still be worth it, especially for some of these immobile champs out there. So a lot of people are starting to shift more towards that Gale Force, Hurricane, Infinity Edge type of build. So Kraken is the greedy damage build. You do have a lot of on-hit stuff or like on-attack stuff or whatever that works with Kraken, but you're going to be a lot squishier, so it just depends. You know, if you're up against Soraka, sure, maybe you can go Kraken, right? But if you're up against Leona or Rel or, you know, something like that that's going to be running at you and you need to be able to reposition, then I think Gale Force is going to be the place to go. Okay, last couple champs here, and then we'll keep moving. Now, Twitch is getting a nerf on this patch, so AP Twitch was really strong on one item, and you had to snowball very hard off of that item because you just kind of fell off a cliff after that item. So Nashor's Tooth at 3,000 gold just gets you so much attack speed, so much on-hit damage, so much raw AP. It's like 140% efficient. It's just a really, really strong item rush. So if you look at this, how his win rate goes, that's the Nashor's spike. And then after that, people just go for death cap. And, you know, for those 10, 15, 20 minutes while he's waiting on death cap, he just goes into the gutter, right? So he was super strong, really OP. If he gets that Nashor's fast and then goes invisible and runs around and just keeps racking up all those kills, he's very strong. But when he has to pause for those 15 minutes to get death cap, then he feels really terrible. And it seems like there should be something better than just straight up rush death cap on him, but I guess, you know, maybe not. I mean, I always thought, it's like, why not Hurricane? Like, I know that it does have the critical strike on it, but your stuff still can crit, and this would give you the movement speed, the wave clear, and your bolts still apply the on-hit off of Nashor's. So, you know, I always kind of wondered, why is it so bad to go like Nashor's into Runan's Hurricane into something like Riftmaker? But I really don't know. People, you know, that have theory crafted and practiced this a lot more than me, I guess, decided that death cap is the way to go. But anyways, they are nerfing the AP on his passive, so that build is going to be a little bit worse. And you're probably going to see more AD Twitch. Again, you know, people will go Kraken, but Gale Force is creeping up again as like a decent option so that you can dodge stuff. Because as soon as you pop up, you know, with Twitch, what's one of the first things going to happen? Everyone's going to use all their CC to try to kill you, and Gale Force can help you dodge some of that. And you have such large range that you can hang out really far in the back and dodge most stuff that they have with the Gale Force. So, are you losing the on-hit damage, you know, with Kraken Slayer? Yes. Once again, I'm pretty sure this only works on the first target that you hit. It's not going to Kraken everybody. So you are losing some of that damage, but I think it's worth trading that off in order to get Flash. And the fact that you can execute, right? Because you can get close enough. If it's an isolated target, you can get close enough in order to, you know, stay on top of them and auto-attack them a lot. And you'll see this a lot with Twitch as well. If you pop up invisible, sometimes they'll just flash away and just like barely get away, you know, with a handful of HP. This is going to give you the execute damage, and it's going to allow you to gap close on them and get that last auto attack or two, or stay within contaminate range so that you can get that kill. So I still think that Gale Force is really underrated on him. And then probably just Runan's into Infinity Edge. So Nashor's is still going to be like an okay meme build, but you have to snowball hard, and it's going to be a lot worse later on. So if you have the appropriate peel, if you've got, it's very good with Lulu or Janna, Yumi, anything that can really boost him up is going to be strong. And the thing that sort of sets him apart is he's a little bit riskier in my mind than some of the other picks. He doesn't have as much utility in terms of just straight up fights, but he does have the invisibility. And so many people just disrespect his invisibility just over and over again. You see it. You know, you'll ping Twitch is missing, and then your mid laner just dies to him, 15 seconds later because they didn't pull back. And it just happens all the time in solo queue. So great at isolation kills, great at sort of just YOLO queue, smurfing games, and very, very good at team fights as well as the game goes on. And he's got that really long range too. So even if the Kaisa or the Vayne are really fed, if he just opens up, he can delete them, from that 800 range before they can get really close to him if he's really fed. So anyways, I think that he's still going to be a pretty good champ, but a little bit more vulnerable than it might seem. Last couple ones here, then we'll call it a day. Tristana, I think, is probably a little bit underrated. People have been trying her out in mid lane and pro. I don't think that has gone over very well. So I'm not really sure what the theory behind that is. Literally on 11.4 has a 0% win rate. She's 0-5. So I'm not sure who theory crafted that to think that was a good idea. I've seen it do all right. I guess last patch it did do well. Out of 16 games, it was basically 70%. So that's not a ton of games played, but I guess in very specific situations, it did do well. So I guess the potential is there, but as far as bot lane's concerned, she still has a high win rate right now, and she's very good if you can snowball hard with aggressive lanes, but you have to have that killer mentality. I just did recently 2 coaching sessions for Tristana, so be sure to check that out if you want to hear some more commentary about that. But the Hail plus Kraken works really well with her because when you drop the bomb on somebody, you really want to get those 4 auto attacks in there so that you get the bomb reset, so that you can jump on them again. Because remember, the bomb resets not just on kills and assists, it does reset on those too, but it also resets if you get 4 stacks on your bomb and you're able to blow it up. So that's the theory behind Hail. If you're already doing Hail, you might as well do Kraken so you get that triggered faster. And then you have really high burst damage on your ult. It does 300 damage at level 1, which is a lot for an ult that's on a low cooldown like that. So with Triss, a lot of times you can jump, and then while you're mid-air, you can throw the bomb on them, possibly even get off 1 auto attack, because you can auto attack mid-air as well. So you just want to jump right on them, throw that bomb on them, just Hail of Blades triggers, boom, 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 and then, bomb blows up, and then you jump on them again with your W. And early game, it's just a tremendous amount of damage. It's almost impossible to get away from them, even if you flash. If she lands on you first, if you don't flash the initial landing, and she gets that slow on you, and then 1 or 2 auto attacks, even if you flash after that, and she gets that 4th bomb trigger, she's just going to be able to gap close again. So, super strong snowball-y champ with things like Leona, Thresh, Nautilus, just anything that can force fights early. She's going to be one of the best at trading, just because the base damage on the bomb, is really high, and the W is actually pretty good in the early game too. So she's got that all-in potential early. She has good push early. It is hard to last hit with her because you cannot control the explosive shot. I wish they would just take off the automatic explosion on minions or whatever, and just maybe lower the cooldown on your bomb so that you have more control over the wave. So you can bomb the wave if you want. But anyways, that's just kind of a wishful thinking. But that's why Kraken works, and then sometimes people will go for this Stormrazor because it's going to give you that extra little bit of burst off the 140 as soon as you, or the 120 bonus magic damage as soon as you come in, and it has that slow so that they're more likely to, stay close enough for you to get those 4 bomb shots. I'd be curious to see where Collector comes in, and Collector comes in as being the best choice again. So a lot of people don't get Collector on her, but I would highly consider it because you have so much upfront burst, and you can get the Serrated Dirk early, which, as I explained, is the most OP AD item cost for cost. It's just too strong. And your bomb, I'm 99% sure it's physical damage, so that would benefit from it. Your ultimate is magic damage, so that's kind of a feels bad. But the bomb is physical damage, and that's where most of your damage is probably coming from in these all-ins. And just having that little bit of execute is nice. Now, it does not have attack speed on it, and she does benefit very heavily from attack speed later on in the game, but I would just get it done. Just get those kills. You know, the lethality is going to help you out with that. I think her rocket jump, her W, might also be magic damage, which doesn't work super well with lethality, but nevertheless, just kill him. Like, it's just, I don't know. I feel like I would just go for this, because it seems to me like you really, if you're picking Tristana, you need to try to snowball early. She does have a decent late game. You know, she gets a lot of range with her levels. She has her Q as an attack speed steroid, but she doesn't have a lot of AoE damage. Like, she's not going to be doing, like, Hurricane rockets. She's not going to have Twitch's ultimate. Even Kaisa with Hurricane is probably going to do more. She's much more of a single target, let's just melt one person type of champ. And her main, you know, sort of claim to fame are those jumps. Right, so getting in there, getting those kills, getting those resets, and being able to jump away. You know, whether it's getting those solo kills or even diving under tower, killing somebody and then jumping away. That's really what she's all about. So I think that Collector kind of suits that playstyle a bit more, even though people aren't really doing it. But anyways, really strong, especially if you can snowball in the early game off of an aggressive support. Then the last couple of ones we'll mention here. Ashe. Still okay. A lot of people are just going to take Cleanse versus your Arrow these days, and that can feel kind of bad if it's like Leona Ashe. If you chain together your CC, and they're just able to break 2 pieces of CC, like if you hit with your Ashe Arrow and then Leona just follows up with her R almost immediately, being able to cleanse and get out of both of those can feel kind of bad. But she is pretty good at kiting some of these other champs out there, and I think she's probably using Gale Force also. She's using Kraken, but what's that Gale Force percentage looking like? It's looking good, as it always does. So yeah, being able to reposition off of Gale Force so that you can kite better with your ice is pretty good, and that is very nice, you know, against the Udyrs and the Skarners. Now keep in mind that with Phase Rush, though, that does make them 75% immune to slows, which is rough. And if you're against some champs that can get like Boots of Swiftness, like Leona and things like that, they will have some resistance to your slows. But you still have like Premier Engage with your ult. You have pretty good damage, wave clear, slows, all that stuff in the fights with your Runaan's Hurricane. So she still puts out like some pretty respectable damage and has pretty good utility. Although she is kind of a sitting duck if you don't take Gale Force. So you probably want Cleanse, you probably want Gale Force in a lot of comps. But she does have a lot of potential there. So not as much top-end damage as some of these other choices, but really good utility and sort of the premier engage. Do not fire your arrows cross-map. Please just save it for your lane. Save it for a gank. Look for a high percentage play instead of a YOLO 1% play, because if they see you fire that across the map, they're going to know that you don't have anything. Your lane opponents are going to know that you don't have anything anymore, and they're going to come in and kill you or pressure you off the wave. So try not to YOLO. Okay, last couple picks here, and then we'll call it a day. Misfortune, I dropped down a little bit. People are getting fond of this like Mermana build on her, and I just think it's just too slow. There is a lot more mobility in the game right now with kind of everybody taking Gale Force that can reposition out of your ultimate. And so she's okay. It's just, and you are still seeing some of these team fight metas, but so much of it is like skirmishing now. It's like the Darius, Udyr, Garen, like a lot of this stuff is probably going to be able to get out of your ultimate, or it's just going to be so tanky that you can't kill him with the ultimate anymore. So still has some good options, still okay, but I'd probably transition out of it. Sivir, again, it's a tier user. I'm not a fan of it right now. People are going with this tier Dustblade build with her, which does make your Q really hit hard. But I don't know. She just feels a little too gimmicky. If you want that kind of engage, I'd rather just have the support take Shirelia's or something. Or, you know, a lot of champs are already going to have engage themselves. They'll have Stride Breaker. They'll have Kim Tank. There's just so many different itemization and champion options to get on people and stick to them that I just think her ult is not as necessary as it has been in the past. Draven can still snowball hard. He'll be all right. Senna's okay. She doesn't take Barons quickly, doesn't take towers quickly, has a hard time, you know, carving through tanks. She can like really blow up squishies if you do get a lot of souls, but I find a lot of people just don't harvest enough souls in the laning phase to really take advantage of her. She takes a little while to come online, in my opinion. Samira is still kind of in the gutter after those nerfs. Xayah is rising up. If you're really good on her, if she's with a Rakan, people are playing her in pro, You know, she could be as high as potentially tier A, but I've got her down a little bit lower. Some people are playing Callista in Pro. I think she's just overrated. She just takes way too many spears, way too long. Just does not have enough burst damage in my mind to really survive. Or to really thrive, I should say. So she's okay, but it requires coordination with your support, and it just takes so long to kill people when you're sticking them with those spikes. And then Kog'Maw did get a buff on this patch, so we'll see. Maybe he could be as high as tier B, but he's just a stand and fire champion. I would probably still go Gale Force on him, even though Kraken is where you want to be. Gale Force Cleanse is probably what you're going to have to take if you want to run Kog'Maw. Caitlyn can be really strong in the early game. Most people just don't have the mechanics to pull off her combos correctly, but if you can snowball really hard, she's great. I still think that if you want one of those, you know, long range, stand and fire, harassment type of champions, I'd rather just go with Jinx, or maybe even a Phelios, but Caitlyn's okay, or even Ashe. And then kind of the untouchables down here that I just really would not play right now is Corki. They just need a rework of this guy. I don't know exactly what it would be. Just change around his cooldowns or his ratios or just something. And then Varus, they've tried to make him playable, but he's just a stand and fire champion that just doesn't do enough damage. I would just rather play Ashe if you want the engage. And then Quinn, you know, if you're just kind of trolling around and you want to snowball, she can be okay, but she's really short range, has no AoE, is extremely reliant on snowballing, and I just think she's just going to get annihilated most of the time, unless you're like a Challenger Quinn one-trick playing in gold. I just don't really see that happening too much in the meta right now. If you roam extremely well with your bird, like maybe, but it's just such a risky playstyle. I just wouldn't recommend it. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did, and come by check out the stream around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every night, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.